When people think about the fall of the Roman Empire, they usually imagine the same scenes: barbar armies at the city gates, collapsing legions, emperors poisoned through palace intrigue. But the truth is that great empires rarely fall only because of outside attacks. Most of the time they collapse by rotting from within, and one of the strongest causes of that decay has always been money. Rome did not collapse only because of wars. It collapsed because it lost its economic foundation. More specifically, because people lost trust in its money. One of the things that kept Rome standing for so long was its silver currency, the denarius. When it was first minted, it was made from almost pure silver. Soldiers were paid with it, merchants accepted it, and ordinary people stored their savings in it. In other words, the denarius was not just a coin. It was a symbol of trust in Rome itself. People trusted the currency because Rome was strong. And because the currency was trusted, the economy kept moving. But running a massive empire is incredibly expensive. Armies need salaries, roads and aqueducts must be maintained, wars have to be financed, and borders must be defended. As Rome expanded, its expenses slowly began to spiral out of control. The state treasury was under pressure. Raising taxes would have angered the population, so the rulers chose another path. They reduced the amount of silver inside the coins. At first, they tried to make sure nobody noticed. The coins looked the same, but what was inside had changed. During the reign of Augustus, the denarius contained around 95% silver. Over the centuries, that percentage steadily dropped. Eventually, the coins became little more than cheap metal covered with a thin layer of silver. Of course, people noticed. And once trust was shaken, everything began to change. Prices started rising because money was no longer tied to real value. Wheat that once cost a single denarius suddenly required dozens of coins. Soldiers demanded higher wages because their pay no longer bought what it once did. Merchants became reluctant to accept weakened currency, and in some regions people even returned to barter. What was happening was actually a very familiar cycle. The government tried to create more money, the value of money fell, people lost confidence, and then even more money was created to try to save the system. And everything became worse. This crisis hit Rome especially hard during the 3rd century. Emperors changed constantly. Civil wars erupted, plagues spread, and the borders came under attack. But behind all that chaos was a financial system that had already been broken. The state continued collecting taxes, but the value of the money it collected kept shrinking. Farmers abandoned their land. Trade networks weakened. People stopped trusting the future. Emperor Diocletian tried to save the system. He introduced laws that fixed prices on goods and services. Official prices were set for everything from bread to wages, and harsh punishments were imposed on those who broke the rules. But it did not work. Because the problem was not the prices. The problem was the money itself. People could not suddenly trust a worthless currency just because the government ordered them to. As a result, black markets expanded, official trade collapsed, and the system became even more fragile. Later, Constantine the Great introduced a more reliable gold coin called the solidus, which restored some stability in the eastern part of the empire. But for the Western Roman Empire, it was already too late. Its economic foundation had decayed. Financing armies became harder. Trade was collapsing, and the public no longer trusted the state. Rome did not fall overnight. It slowly unraveled, and the currency crisis was one of the most important parts of that unraveling. What is interesting is this: history did not stop there. The same story has repeated itself again and again in different eras. Germany after World War I is a good example. Crushed under war debts, the government kept printing money. At first it seemed like an easy solution, but eventually hyperinflation exploded. People carried wages home in wheelbarrows. Those who had spent their entire lives saving suddenly became poor. Something similar happened in Zimbabwe. As the economy deteriorated, the government continued printing money. Eventually, stores could not change price tags fast enough. People abandoned the national currency altogether and began using foreign money instead. Today, the situation looks different, but the logic is still the same. Modern economies are no longer tied to gold. Most currencies are built entirely on trust. Governments borrow heavily. Central banks inject trillions into markets, and people assume the system can continue forever. Maybe today people are not pushing wheelbarrows full of cash through the streets, but in many countries the feeling is familiar. Salaries appear to rise, yet life becomes more expensive. Buying a home becomes harder. Saving money becomes harder. People work constantly but still feel less secure than before. Because inflation often moves quietly. And history shows us something important. Money is not just an economic tool. It is also the foundation of social trust. Once people stop trusting money, it is not only the economy that weakens. Institutions begin to weaken as well. Contracts lose meaning. Trade breaks down. The authority of the state begins to fade. People lose hope in the future. That is exactly what the story of Rome teaches us. Sometimes the real danger is not the enemy at the gates. Sometimes the greatest collapse begins quietly from within. And maybe that is why Rome still matters today. Because it reminds us that once trust disappears, even the strongest systems can collapse much faster than anyone expects.